Welcome to PushMowerRepair.com. Today we're going to show you how to bypass the ignition cables that are pretty poorly designed in the Victa G4 Carburettor. We're going to do that with the following tools. So you're going to need a drill with a drill bit roughly matching the size of an on-off switch, which you'll need as well. 2 pieces of wire, Phillips head screwdriver, some wire strippers, spark plug socket set, and finally some pliers. You also need some electrical tape and cable ties. To determine whether you need to do this, first of all you need to test the spark plug, see whether it's sparking. We have shown you how to do that in another video. So here we've found that as we've tested the spark plug, we've had it set, the throttle set in the start position, and we haven't been able to elicit a spark. The next thing to test is pulling out the ignition cables from the carburetor and seeing if they're affecting it. In order for us to look at the ignition cables, we're just going to have to remove this cover. On this mower there are 2 screws here that we've taken out. This part should just lift out. We have 3 screws here that we've undone, and then I'll just lift off. And then just for ease of access, we'll remove this piece as well. So just on the bottom of the carburetor here is the ignition cables that we're talking about. To access them, just unplug the carburetor from the engine, give it a twist and pull it out, and you can get into the cables nice and easily. If we're going to test whether they're affecting the spark in the spark plug, we just need to first remove this black one from underneath, and that's enough for us to get them to stop working. Now that we've removed the ignition cables, we're going to test this spark plug by holding it here and pulling the start cord. If you need a more in-depth guide, refer to our other video. Now that we've seen that there is a spark after removing the ignition cables, we clearly know that that's the problem, and we're going to bypass them. So if you remember, we've taken out the black wire already. That should be out. In order for us to pull out this second wire, it's important that you make sure the throttle is halfway between start and run, otherwise the throttle will clamp the wire in there. Now that that's moved into position, this grey wire should just pull out, like so. So once this rubber piece at the end of the wire wears away, what happens is these 2 wires constantly touch, which closes the circuit, and regardless of the position that you have the throttle in, these ignition cables won't allow the engine to function. In order to bypass that, we install new wires onto them and a new switch so that you don't have to worry about that. First thing we want to do is just cut off the metal pieces at the end of the wire on both wires. Then we want the wire strippers and remove the sheathing. Give yourself plenty of room to work with, makes the job nice and easy. Also, it's important that you don't cut the wires too far back, because you want to give yourself as much room as you can, really. Make things easier for yourself. Then just give the wires a good twist. Then you get your 2 pieces of wire that we showed you in the tools that you'll need, and you connect one to either one of these cables, and just remember which one you've connected to which. Again, strip these wires so that you can connect the 2. So that I can easily remember which one is which, I'm going to connect the black wire to the black wire on the mower. Again, your cables may be different depending on what you use. So just twist them around each other so you can make sure you get a good connection. And then you want to cover that in electrical tape, and a cable tie as well helps to keep it tight and a good connection. Then do the same for the other wire. Also, if you're worried about having a really good connection, you can solder the 2 wires together, and that may possibly be a better way of doing it. Then just make sure that stays in place, like I mentioned previously. Put a cable tie on there, nice and tight. So here you can see both of those wires completed, they've been connected. So when selecting a drill bit to use, just make sure it's a similar size to the portion of your switch that has to go through the cover. These two look pretty good match, so just line it up with the spot that you found. And don't push too hard whilst you're drilling, because like we mentioned before, you don't want to drill through the fuel tank. Now that you've drilled that hole, you've made sure that the switch fits. The easiest way to connect everything is to thread the wires through the hole, rather than putting the switch in first. Bring them through and then twist everything together so you got a nice connection, and just thread them through the back of the switch. For this switch, it doesn't matter which wire connects to which point, but for you, if you've got a toggle switch, you might need to pay attention to that and follow the instructions on your switch. As you can see, just connect them the same way as we did before. Wrap the wire around the connection point on the switch, cover that in electrical tape, and cable tie it all. Again, if you want, you're more than welcome to solder everything together. Then just push it back through this hole. You might need to be careful when you're doing this of the size of your cable ties. Make sure that they're not so big that they won't fit back through. And then put your switch back in place. Again, if like us you've got a nut to hold the switch in its position, make sure that you've put that onto the wires before connecting the wires to the switch. And then after the switch is in, you can tighten the nut on the back to make sure that you've got a good connection. Before putting everything back together, just get your carby, get that rubber cap that we showed you at the beginning, and put it back over this hole where the ignition cables were going before. Then get one of the metal pieces you cut off the wire and thread it through that hole to hold this rubber piece in place, just so that we can make sure there's no dirt getting into the carby. And then put it back in position. Now that the cover's all back on, just get that extra wire and, like we've done, put it neatly behind wherever it goes next to the carburetor and cable tie it in position. You want to keep it away from the engine block.